So, Mr. Jordan, let me direct your attention to Section 701 of the bill, page 142, which reads in part, "The Secretary of Homeland Security may grant parole to any alien who is a national of the Republic of Cuba and is living in the Republic of Cuba." So, for some strange reason, you don't want to use parole for Ukrainians, but you do want to use them for Cubans, who are, according to this, are exempt from all restrictions that apply to every other nationality in the rest of the title. So it just seems kind of strange to me. Can you explain why?
We just kept the Cuban Family Reunification Parole Program in place. It's been a long-standing program, so we kept that in place. Anyone else from around the world, it's a the law is the law. It's a case-by-case basis, and the administration can use that on a case-by-case basis. That's what we have in the legislation.
So Afghanistan under the Taliban seems to be a worse life for people in Afghanistan than in Cuba. Why aren't they carved out for humanitarian parole?
Again,
or for that matter, why isn't the Afghan Adjustment Act included in this bill?
Again, we stuck with what the law is. The Cuban plan has been in place for a long time. We kept that in place. Others, the law says case-by-case basis. We went back to that.
Well, I mean, you're writing a law here. Why not add Venezuelans or Nicaraguans?
We had a long debate about that.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll debate it more. But you're telling me what's in the bill, and I'm just telling you why.
Yeah, sure. No, it just seems that this is an example kind of selective compassion that, makes one wonder why.
I would argue it's adherence to the rule of law.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
Well, but
The Biden administration not following it.
we're treating one group of nationals very differently from others, from countries that, quite frankly, are experiencing far worse human rights abuses. Mr. Nadler.
Yeah, I was just wondering how Mr. Jordan, my other Republican colleagues, would react to a proposal to make things uniform by stopping the program for Cuba and making that an individual case-by-case basis, as it is for Venezuela, for Ukraine, et cetera.
I think we spoke on that with what we passed on the committee.
Well, well, we're here now, right? I mean, so when we're the Rules Committee. We can make any amendment in order if we want to. My fear is that my Republican friends who are chairs are making it clear that they want no amendments in order. But would Mr. Jordan, you be open, or Mr. McCall or Mr. Green, would you be open to revisiting the issue with regard to the Ukrainians? I mean, there is an amendment. I mean, Ms. Jayapal offered an amendment. She's offered it again. Would you, I'm not even asking you to support it, but would you be open to having it brought to the floor so there could be a debate and people could vote however they wanted to?
If Mr. Nadler offered an amendment to get rid of the Cuban Family Reunification Parole, I would oppose that. And I don't know if you're going to make that in order.
I asked, that was not my question. My question was, if there's an amendment, there's no amendment that I know of right now that's pending on the Cuban humanitarian parole, but there is one on the Ukrainian one. Ms. Jayapal has that amendment. I mean, would you be okay? Would you be, you can oppose it, but would you be open to allowing us to bring it to the floor so that we can debate it and people could vote up either way on it? Would you be open to that?
I think if I could chip in,
Yeah.
did you want me to, or
I mean, I
all
want all three. Yeah.
My perspective on this is that the current crisis is because we're violating the laws on how the asylum process should be working. And that's why people are pouring into the country, because they see all the exceptions that are being made. And so I think the point of this legislation that came out of the judiciary side is to just go back to the way the laws are written.
But there's a difference, as you know, between asylum and humanitarian parole. And we are, and the conversation was about that you're making an exception for Cubans on humanitarian parole that you extend to no other nationality. We have Ukrainians who are experiencing the most horrific circumstances due to Putin's war crimes against them.
Isn't that the whole nature of the asylum process? A person is
No,
being
but-
persecuted by their country
No,
or whatever.
uh,
I mean, that's the whole point of the asylum process and the law to
Again,
begin with.
there's a difference between asylum and humanitarian parole. Asylum, you have to have a well-founded fear of persecution. Many of the Ukrainians who are here right now, who are here under this program that the Biden administration has extended, may not necessarily fit the strict criteria of a well-founded fear of persecution. But we know that it would be dangerous to send them home. There are a number of nationalities that fit into that category. And so there is a difference. That's one of the reasons why we have temporary protected status for certain groups of immigrants, because the situation in their country is terrible and it is potentially dangerous, but they may not fit that criteria. So there are two things. So on the asylum stuff, as Mr. Castro pointed out, the bill that is before us is quite harsh. He used the example of a Uyghur fleeing China, coming to our border and being forced to stay in Mexico. So that's one thing. But we're talking about humanitarian parole. And so all I'm asking you is, would you don't even have to vote for it, is whether or not the Jayapal Amendment, which basically says that the Ukrainians who are here, can basically remain here, and that this program will continue for them. That's all. I'm just asking you, can actually we bring an amendment to the floor that would do that? You could vote however you want to, and you can check with your team and staff and come up with all kinds of talking points why it's a bad idea. But I think that, given the fact that we are making an exception for one group of nationals, I mean, there is a horrific, brutal, savage war going on in Ukraine. I don't know, does anyone want to add?
No, I had a war crimes hearing,
Yeah.
and I agree with you. You and I both
Yeah,
agree on
I
this issue. I think H.R. 2, though, clearly says that individuals already paroled in the United States are protected in this bill. And I don't know how more plain language I can make it.
So what about the ones that would come?
So
So would they,
I think, again, a
so
case-
if you're here now,
Yeah.
then you're okay, but I mean, that's assuming that Putin's war of aggression stops. So if you come tomorrow, let's say this bill becomes law today, so you come tomorrow, you're out of luck, just because, I mean, why would we do this? Mr. Castro?
Political asylum, I'm sorry, but
No,
political asylum is always available on a case-by-case basis.
Right, and it's really hard to get. We have dealt with immigrants and refugees who have fled some of the most horrific situations, who don't quite meet the standard to be able to prove to the courts that, in fact, they have a well-founded fear of
I think
persecution.
fear of
It
the
is a very, very high
Fear of the
standard.
Taliban, fear of,
and you
fear
know-
of Putin, fear of the CCP persecuting Uyghur Muslims. I think that's why we set up political asylum, fear of persecution.
But I wanted to say, Ranking Member, I think,
I don't think fear of Putin, I mean, to me, I don't think fear of Putin qualifies for political asylum in our courts. Yeah, Mr. Castro, Mr.
really,
Yeah.
really quick, just to give some context and why your question is incredibly important. People on parole need to renew their parole each year. So current parolees, it's true, would ride out the year, but the new criteria in H.R. 2, this legislation, would make them ineligible for renewal. So it's true that the people here would continue on for the year.
For a year.
But the coming year, they're gone. So that's what's at stake for each of those communities that I mentioned, and one of them that you were just talking about.
And why would we even do that to the Ukrainians who have fled this terrible violence and unrest? I mean, like, what do people think?
I'd simply point out that when we're talking about parole for Ukrainians, I mean, in addition to what you just said about the year, the Ukrainians want to go home. They want to stay here only until that war ends and they can go home. This is not a class of people who want to stay here. We're not talking about, well, we may be talking about a few people who claim political asylum, but for the, and they should be subject to the normal asylum requirements. But we're talking for the most part, 99%, about people who want to go home, who may come here last year, or in the last few months since the invasion in the last year, or next month, or the month after that, or however long this war lasts, but want to go home as soon as it's safe to do so, and the war is over. And that's what is prevented by this bill.
So, if I understand this correctly, if this bill were to become law today, if you are a Ukrainian who came here tomorrow, you would not be able to get parole, number one. Number two, if you're a Ukrainian who is here, you have a year. And then what do you do after a year?
You got to get out.
Even if the war is still going on.
Yeah, you got to get out, yeah.
Did anyone, I mean, disagree, I mean, are we misreading something here? I mean, really? Oh, my God, I yield back.
Hey, before you click on the next video, if y'all could do me a big favor and hit that like button. The algorithm loves it, and so do I, because it helps promote these videos and get the message out about what our government has been doing. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications, because every time I put out a video, you want to know about it, right? Thanks again, and have a good one. See you on the next one. Peace.